everyone. I'm meteorologist Brittany Van Voorhees here on Live Weather Impact Plus, filling in for Chief Meteorologist Brad Panovich this evening. A lot to talk about weather-wise. Today was, I wouldn't say it was expected to be a crazy weather day, but things really started to develop quickly, especially for our communities in the mountains and foothills. And now the areas that did seem to get it the worst were parts of Caldwell County, Burke County, and even some spots too in Iredell County. First thing we want to show you is some of the video of what actually happened. So this is a video here from David Hughes. This is parts of Caldwell County near Zack's Fork Road. I want to make sure I get that right. Zack with a K, Fork with a K. Pretty substantial flooding here, as there were multiple reports of this in parts of Caldwell County. Now, I would remind folks that if they have pictures and videos and they can do so safely and they'd like to share it with WCNC Charlotte, they can do so multiple ways. You can send it to one of our team members using the Near Me function in the WCNC Charlotte mobile app. That is just a really quick way for us to kind of get the information to the National Weather Service and other folks as well. Now, they weren't the only ones, Caldwell County, that had, of course, pretty significant rain. There was also significant flooding in parts of Burke County. Now, that heavy rain was sent in, I believe, by David. Let me make sure I'm getting some of these names here. I don't want to.
Dustin Ferris.
Dustin Ferris. Thank you so much. I skipped the other one on accident. Thank you, Jeb. Okay, amazing. All right, let's double check. Okay, so the first Caldwell County video came in from David Hughes. And then this one that Jeb's going to be working on getting is from Dustin Ferris. This was in Burke County. And now this second video, you'll see it in a second, does look a little bit more so like it was already in an area where there was a creek, but it still produced pretty heavy rain. If it's that's that. There we go. There you go. They sent it. Dustin did give us permission. So that's always a good way to get information from our team members really quickly. Now, what's happening now? Well, there's not a lot happening right now. Thankfully, most of the activity is out of here. But before we move forward, I do want to talk a little bit more about what areas that you should avoid this evening. So first things first, I'm going to pull up our web article that has kind of all of these closures, but there are a lot of areas that Caldwell County emergency officials are asking you to avoid. One of them is that area in Zack's Fork Road, because of the fact that they saw significant flooding in that area. Demet Road, St. John's Road, and Indian Grave Road, John Kirby Place, and Blair's Fork Road. So this is information from Caldwell County officials. Please do not attempt to drive through flooded areas, reminding you to turn around, don't drown. Now, you've probably heard this a dozen, gazillion, bazillion times, but a few years ago, the National Weather Service kind of came up with these phrases that rhymed or just kind of seemed fun, silly, goofy. Now, they're not always, of course, in the topic that they're talking about, but it was a really good way for people to remember. Think like the same reason why you learned, prepositions by using a song. So turn around, don't drown is the one for flooded roadways. When thunder roars, move indoors is the one for severe thunderstorms or just regular thunderstorms. And then one you probably don't hear as often here in the central part of the Carolinas, but break the grip of the rip, and that's just a reminder to always swim parallel to the shore to try to get away from a rip current. Now, these were not the only areas that saw significant damage. In fact, I'm going to pull up the National Weather Service feed, so Jeb, bear with me, but it kind of goes through some of the places in Iredell County that saw some pretty significant wind gust impacts. So I want folks to be aware of this as well. I feel like Iredell County, northern Alexander, while they did have some heavy rain, a bigger risk was from the gusty winds that they saw. There were multiple reports of trees down in some of these areas. So Grassy Knob Road, the fire department there was reporting several trees down. Taylor Springs Road, Howard's Bridge Road, West Memorial Highway, Myers Mill Road, Lenny's Mill Road, and Wilkesboro Highway. There were also some videos that we didn't get official permission to use, but I actually saw them pop up in the NWS chat that were showing really heavy rain, essentially completely closing down portions of Grassy Knob Road. So not just gusty winds there, but also really heavy rain. Bill Tuttle Road, we had water inside a mobile home that was reported. Howard's Bridge Road, this is all that was in Caldwell County. This part is in Iredell County. Howard's Bridge Road, Mitch Road, and Lenny's Mill, Myers Mill, trees down all from gusty winds. Back to Caldwell County. we had reports of potential, I say reports because a lot of this came through the National Weather Service chat. It's an official way that we can kind of all talk to each other. So it's emergency management, media, meteorologists, and the NWS. But a lot of these reports, of course, come through eventually. So just wanted to give people early heads up. Blair's Fork Road, we had a man was reporting he was stuck in shoulder deep water. A swiftwater rescue was reported in Valmead where people were apparently holding onto trees to kind of get away from some of that flooding. So this is pretty substantial stuff. Indian Grave Road, there was a Caldwell County weather spotter, which are essentially more trained weather spotters, were advising water up to tires and threatening his barn at his home, actually. And it looked like there was a lot of heavy rain that was also including a nearby creek that was allowing the water to rise really, really quickly. Indian Grave Road, where that was on the Lenore side of Patterson. So you think right between those two areas in Caldwell County. So that's just a lot, right? It's a lot to happen on a Thursday afternoon, whereas if you live in parts of the metro, you're in Mecklenburg County, Gaston County, Lincoln, you're like, what the heck are you talking about? We didn't have anything today. Well, while you didn't have anything, we're still going to talk about what's happening right now and what's to come. So we're going to go to weather graphics now. We'll talk a little bit about what we have now and then what's to come with the storm later on today and, of course, into the next few days. So here's a wider view. I just wanted to show you severe thunderstorm warning still impacting parts of Greensboro over toward Raleigh-Durham. That is not impacting us here in the Charlotte area. This is all outside of our viewing area. But we do have currently a flash flood warning in effect for these same areas I just mentioned a second ago in Caldwell County. So here's where the heaviest rain fell, again, between Patterson and Lenore, that's in Caldwell County, all the way up toward Kings Creek and Yadkin Valley. As we zoom in, here are some of the reports I toggled on. Now, this is radar estimated reports, which essentially means that, well, two reasons. One, because the radar site is so far away from some of those areas at higher elevations, it essentially gets blocked. What I mean by that is, actually pop me up for 1 second, Joe, just so I can talk about what I'm talking about, just because that was silly. Okay, so think about, okay, this is a mountain side. This is my phone, okay? Well, if the radar beam is coming this way, but the heaviest rain fell here and it hasn't rushed down yet, it's not recording it at the same accuracy level, essentially. And then on top of that, because of the different elevation changes, you have, somewhere where you could have 2 inches one spot, but then of course maybe it's a little bit more of an elevation change 5 minutes away, and because of the side of the mountain or the foothill or wherever you are, the water is running off quickly, so it's not only not getting a correct radar site, but maybe now you have the issue with a potential landslide or mudslide. So again, about 2 inches to about 3.5 inches of rain, again, fell in a very, very short period of time. Here's where the main kind of impact is right now. You can see that flash flood warning in effect from now through 6:45. Now, the reason why it probably is expected to cancel at 6:45 is because they're not expecting a lot of additional rainfall. That doesn't mean, though, a flood advisory for 1 or 2 spots won't remain, so this will be over in a few minutes. But again, the worst saw it near Zach's Fork Road, which is actually this main thoroughfare between Valmead all the way up toward Grandin. I highlighted that in orange so people could see. That's also along a creek, which I'm sure caused, again, additional issues when it came to water starting to rise because, you got heavy rain, you got a water source nearby. You guys know the drill as to what happens there. Now, as we take a wider view, you can see again, that's most of Caldwell County, a little tiny sliver of Burke County, and then you have northern Alexander County as well. To be honest, I'm a little bit surprised that they included northern Alexander just because we didn't have as many reports as anything significant there. Plus, it was more of an actual severe thunderstorm warning versus slow-moving flash flood. But it is there nonetheless, and nonetheless, it will expire officially in 6 minutes. So again, here's back to that wider view of our viewing area. Well, let's check out the rest of the Carolinas. So I just told you, of course, Greensboro over toward Raleigh, some storms there. You can see a few areas in southern, what is the word I'm looking for? South Carolina, that's the word. The beautiful state I was looking for. But this mess here, as you get closer to Virginia, Bristol, Tennessee, there's a chance that a lot of this could wrap around and bring us a few storms in the mountains. It's all this mess I'm talking about. But right now, the flow is still looking to be generally this way. And so I think a lot of this will clip our northern communities, if not miss us altogether. So I don't think we're going to see additional significant risk for flooding, but I'll be in the Weather Center, tracking it all for you throughout the rest of this evening. So if you have plans across the Charlotte Metro, one of the reasons why, well, I guess it's a big reason why, because she's very important. Brad's off tonight is because his daughter is at a swim meet, so go, Kenley, hopefully you win. But, of course, that for folks who are going to be out and about this evening in the Metro, in Mecklenburg County, Gaston, Union, Anson, Cabarrus, wherever you are, you're pretty much going to be rain-free and quiet. I'm really not worried about storms for you. So here's the future cast as you go throughout the rest of the afternoon and evening. We will have a weak frontal boundary passing through the area, so that's why you see some of those clouds starting to fizzle away. And so tomorrow will actually be a much nicer day overall. Now, will it be spring-like with temperatures in the 70s? No. But will the humidity drop a little bit with highs only right around 90 and it actually feels like the actual air temperature? Yes. So that's kind of how things are going to transition over the next few days. Today we had storms, and I know it has felt like a rinse repeat. We've had storms almost every single day for about a week and a half. So with this front moving through, we will get some slightly drier air. Again, dry is relative because it's this time of the year, but it will be a much nicer weekend, especially for me, because that also means I don't have to come in early job and track storms on my Saturday and Sunday when I have to work in the night shift. But okay, so 93 on Saturday, 95 on Sunday. Heat and humidity remains. Yes, the heat index is still going to be high, but it's just not going to be as high as where we could be if it was even toastier. But that eventually does change. So as this front pushes through and brings us some slightly drier air, we're going to be relatively comfortable Friday, and then the humidity is going to crank back up. But that heat dome that we have been talking about for days and days and days, that was eventually going to move over the Carolinas, that's most of next week. So peak heat index values tomorrow, again, right around 90, that's the actual air temperature. Saturday and Sunday, we're going to soar up to the upper 90s. Then once we hit Monday, I think that's going to be the stretch, probably Monday through Friday, that we'll see heat index values 100 degrees, if not higher. Now, I've kept these numbers kind of level so far for Monday and Tuesday, just because we need to kind of watch how trends go over the next few days to see if this would be a significant bust. Earlier this week, we were expecting some triple digits, and that didn't happen because our air was just too dry, which was a good thing. You're never sad about a busted high heat index forecast. But long-range models do look to see anywhere between 105 to 107, which would be prompting a heat advisory and would be something more substantial. Now, I know that Brad mentioned this a few days ago. I think I don't know if it was on his show or on the regular newscast, but it is a good reminder that please don't come at me about the heat, okay? I love you guys so much. I do this job so that I can help keep people safe, but what I don't love is an email that says, I know what the feels like temperature is. Why are you trying to tell me what it feels like? The feels like temperature, the heat index, is a scientific calculation based on how our bodies respond to elevated humidity. So when it's really muggy, our bodies can't sweat properly and can't kind of release that sweat properly, and so it makes it feel hotter, and it's a reason why it's hotter and more humid during the summer versus the wind chill during the winter, which the wind chill is our body's response to the wind passing across our skin as it's cold outside. So it is not a made-up number that I'm just throwing at you for fun. I would never want a feels like temperature to be above probably 80 degrees, if I'm being honest with you, but because I like the spring. It's my favorite season, but regardless, 100 plus Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, likely, and Friday. So you get the benefits with the negativity, because tomorrow it will be fantastic. Even though meteorological spring is already in place, astronomical spring begins tomorrow night. And it will be a dry day, mostly sunny, temps near 90. Again, we could actually be in the upper 60s tonight, which would be relatively pleasant since it's been so disgusting the past few days. But then you look at Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and I'm going to show you the extended really quickly through Friday. Every single day of those 5, I would expect temperatures to at least hit 100 degrees, if not higher. Yes, that could prompt a few heat advisories. And there are a few days that I'll probably highlight to extra encourage folks to stay weather alert. But truth be told, when I was doing the forecast earlier, I really wanted folks to focus on today. Sometimes I don't like putting multiple weather alerts on the 7-day, for multiple stretches, even if it's storms one day, heat another day, just because I think sometimes it gets confusing. We just want folks to be, very, very cautious of one thing. So that's the heat. That is the humidity. I'm going to check right now, chat, just to see if we're getting any additional reports of anything crazy happening. Yeah, we're getting a few more reports of trees down. Most of this is in Iredell County. So we have Morgan, Ford, and Rupert Road. That's in Union Grove. We have Grassy Knob Road, also in Union Grove. Zeb Road in Union Grove also has some trees down. Again, most of this is in Iredell County. Trees down at Wilkesboro Highway and Taylor Springs as well. Union Grove and Sandy Springs Road, also in Abbydale Road, that is, in Harmony. So pretty substantial impacts from those storms earlier, but at least we're not seeing additional reports, Jeb. That tells me that that's a good thing, because that means that these storms, again, are winding down. Again, as I mentioned before, I would expect that most of this has started to clear out. I can't rule out a straight afternoon thunderstorm continuing throughout the rest of this evening, but I think the majority of the activity is over, at least for now. So that is fantastic news. Really, really happy about that. Ooh, look at that. So flash flood warning was just canceled by the NWS. So that was expected to cancel at 6:45, and it was. So again, what that essentially means is that they don't expect that to continue, which is fantastic news as well. I did see some things online where people were saying, like, what the heck happened? And I think that the simplest answer to that is the fact that the mountains and foothills are a little bit more susceptible to flooding and flash flooding at that, because of where they are and just the fact that they have different elevation changes. There's a few times, Jeb, that I've actually been at schools and the kids have asked me, what happened? And actually they used Helene as a reference during Helene, because I thought that, sorry, this chair is very, very tall. I'm just trying to get comfy as we talk about storms, but asked what happened, because they thought that it couldn't flood in the mountains or in the foothills. And the answer to that is, well, no, it can flood. But what my assumption is what they probably meant was, like, unlike the Charlotte metro area where we had those water rescues last week, it floods and it kind of sits. So people had to be rescued. Whereas, yes, of course, in the mountains and foothills, a lot of that water runs off. But it runs off, and then where does it go? Causes landslides and mudslides, similar to what we had yesterday in Tennessee. Have we gotten any updates on what happened yesterday in Tennessee or anything like that? When it comes to because I know that you guys had a press conference on Impact News earlier where officials were just so upset, essentially, because they felt like it was kind of like a repeat performance of Helene.
Right.
And I think anytime that something significant like that happens, people have a little bit of, like, almost like weather anxiety that occurs. Which sounds silly, but it's true. I mean, we have there's fears about the weather, very, very common. But a little bit of weather anxiety, because not only is that area in I-40 trying to be rebuilt from Helene, but it's essentially similar impact to what they had last year. And I mean, it can be really, really scary, especially for drivers who saw the videos and the impacts from Helene as well. I mean, it's just, it was, again, insane to see that in such a short period of time, but I think that's also the definition of flash flooding. If you guys are not aware, there is actually flash flood guidance for every single place across the United States. Now, sometimes it needs to be updated for certain areas, and that happens every few years, I believe. But essentially, flash flood guidance is an estimate of the amount of rainfall that would have to happen over an area to cause small streams, local rivers, lakes to rise and then eventually cause flooding, which is probably one of the issues that they had, of course, earlier. So because there's flash flood guidance for every single spot across the United States, then we know how much rain would allow that to happen. And my guess is the same thing. That's what happened up in the mountains today, is a lot of those areas, their flash flood guidance is like 1 hour, 2 to 4 inches of rain. So when you see that, again, happening so quickly based on the fact that they already had flooding over the weekend, that's the big reason why they had such bad impact. So something else that we see in Charlotte a lot, and it's not a bad thing. I mean, we love Charlotte, we love the Queen City, but in an urban area that has less grassy areas and less ability to run off, right? Because they have concrete and buildings and things like that. Sometimes we can have worse flooding for that reason, because there's just less places for the water to go. And I think I actually mentioned this. Did I mention this on Brad's show, or am I just playing and I never said it? But another thing, too, is that Charlotte, the city, the reason why downtown Charlotte is called Uptown, a little fun fact, is that it's actually on a hill, or a bit of a hill. I don't know how much of a hill. I'm not an expert on that. But back in the 1700s, back when they had horses and buggies, that would carry goods and services, up to downtown to sell them, they would say, I'm going up to town. So Jeb is my husband. I'm like, Jeb, I'm going up to town to sell. That's how Uptown came about. So also because of that, if you think of Uptown Charlotte here, that means that because it's on a hill, you're going to have more runoff just naturally, because Uptown itself as a city is higher than everyone else. Plus, not to get into too many semantics, but urban heat island effect also typically means that storms can stay a little bit stronger. And since there's more moisture, that means you can get heavy rainfall. But we're not going to get too nuanced into that, at least right now.
Yeah, it's an interesting fact.
Yes.
Greenways help deal with a lot of that flood.
Yes. Oh my gosh. It's one of my favorite things about Charlotte. There was actually a joke, and I feel like I can say this because I'm from Atlanta, but I can't remember who exactly, but there was some kind of press conference a few years ago I was watching after I moved here that they were talking about the greenways and how they were built to avoid significant flooding, and they were like, we don't want to be Atlanta. And I was like, that's amazing.
Ouch.
Yeah, but hey, it happens. I think that's one of the reasons too, don't quote me on this, but I think that's one of the reasons too why they're so sensitive about like light rail expansion, because they don't want it to become MARTA. I do remember hearing that at a press conference a few years ago, because the MARTA is, so different story for a different day, you guys. But yes, actually Larry told me that, fun fact.
Larry
Doesn't
Wood.
surprise you
It's very,
probably.
very sprinkled.
Yes, he is full of knowledge and full of information. But yeah, so of course, for that same reason, we can see more significant flooding. We also just it's like we get into these patterns like what we had this past week where, we didn't see rain for so long, we were in a drought, and now it's just been like consistent off and on rain for multiple days. Something else that can happen is training, where we get the same storm kind of developing over and over the same spot for multiple days on end. Something else that I think people are going to start to notice into next week is some changes with watches and warnings here in the Carolinas. So I'm going to pull this graphic up, but we are going to see more hazard mitigation simplification. Jeb just looked at me with his eyes large. So if you remember the past few years, the National Weather Service has been making changes when it comes to different advisories that they put out. So heat advisory, or I'm going to use cold weather as an example since we had this a few weeks ago. No, that's just the formula. Let's see. I know we have this graphic somewhere. No, that's just cold. Da-da-da-da. When you like name something and then you can't find it later and you're like, what the heck is going on? No, but okay. Well, we'll talk about heat index first later. We'll worry about that when the time comes. So essentially, the National Weather Service has gone through over the past couple of years what they call hazard mitigation simplification, which essentially means cold weather. We had this actually happen this past winter. There used to be like extreme cold watch, extreme cold warning, wind chill watch, wind chill warning, yada, yada. And it was like very specific criteria. So like the only people who knew whether or not it'd be like a wind chill warning or a cold weather warning would be me and maybe Jeb, because I talked about it too much. But this year, they're going to do the same thing with heat. It's the same reason why, if you noticed a few years ago, we did this actually, or I say they did this actually with like watches and warnings and advisories for flooding. They used to have like small stream flood advisory and like lake flood advisory and flood advisory and flash flood advisory. And people would be like, what the heck? What does this mean? What is the difference? And that doesn't mean that it's not a good thing that they had those differences, because there is a nuanced difference, but it's just easier now for people to understand. Hazard mitigation simplification, again, trying to make it easier for the public to understand. So starting this year, excessive heat warnings are going to be extreme heat warnings, and excessive heat watches are going to be extreme heat watches. So they're going to change essentially the names of them from excessive heat to extreme heat. What there will be no difference to is heat advisories. Now, let me make things a little bit more complicated before making things less complicated. So a heat advisory, again, no changes, 105 degrees or higher. That's in Charlotte. That's for National Weather Service in Greenville, Spartanburg. That's who covers us. Extreme heat watches and warnings, which used to be called excessive heat watches and warnings, are still for 110 degrees or higher. But why is it a watch or a warning? Same reason why it's a severe thunderstorm watch or a warning. A watch, the ingredients are favorable for X, Y, and Z to happen, and a warning is X, Y, and Z is imminent. So a watch might be me forecasting the high temperature or the heat advisory tomorrow, or heat index, can't even speak today, tomorrow to be 110, but maybe now it's 109, and it's going to get hotter, and so now I'm bumping it up to a warning. So again, watch as ingredients are there, and favorable warning as it's happening right now. So that's a little bit actually more simple even than the cold weather ones, because the cold weather ones and the flood ones were like, there's all these watches and warnings out, and we're like pulling them down and trying to like stuff them into one kind of jar. But that's not the case here. Essentially, excessive heat watches and warnings are being changed to extreme heat. The criteria is not changing. But here's where it gets a little bit complicated. we have, this is old branding, so apologies to management because this has not been updated, but we have 4 different National Weather Service offices that cover us. So the majority of our viewing area, shaded in orange, is covered by the National Weather Service in Greenville, Spartanburg. Those are the people that you probably hear us talking about the most. That is Avery County, Burke County, Caldwell County, Alexander County, Iredell County, Lincoln, Gaston, Mecklenburg, Cabarrus, Catawba, Cleveland, York, Chester, Union, I think I already said Cabarrus, and Rowan. Then you have the National Weather Service up in Roanoke, Virginia, which only covers Ashland, Watauga. And then you have the National Weather Service in Columbia, which only covers Lancaster and Chesterfield. And then you have Stanley, Union, or Stanley, Anson, and Richmond that are covered by Raleigh. So here's where this gets a little bit more complicated, is that even though Greenville Spartanburg's criteria is 105 and 110, Lancaster and Chesterfield's is 110 and I believe 115. So there's different criteria. So sometimes you'll see a heat advisory issued and you're like, why is it for everybody except for those 2 counties? Just know that it doesn't mean that they're not seeing the same impacts. It just might be a difference in criteria. Same reason why sometimes you might see a severe thunderstorm and it almost looks like it's leaving York County and like jumping over into Union because that panhandle of Lancaster isn't included because they have different National Weather Service offices. So again, if criteria is different, sometimes they don't stay. So yes, it can be confusing. Yes, it's something that we're all working on, all together for better communication, but it is a thing nonetheless. So we're going to take another look quickly at radar just to check on what's happening across the area. There again is those estimated rainfall totals I told you about earlier in this area of Caldwell County. Haven't seen a lot of additional reports. We know the flash flood warning is out of here. Zacks Fork Road is one of those spots, of course, we were watching earlier. New little tiny cell just popping up in Burke County. So again, this is what I'm talking about when it comes to isolated. When you have one teeny tiny little cell, that's essentially isolated. There's another one there over in Stanley County, but again, that is the exception, not the rule. This action up here, up toward the Tennessee, Virginia border, those are the ones we'll watch to kind of clip the northern parts of the mountains, but at least so far, we're not looking at anything crazy. Here's a wider view of the Carolinas. Again, you can see most areas are dry at this time, and really the worst weather is that cell that's popping over there toward Raleigh. I want folks to just remember that next week the biggest change comes when it comes to the heat and humidity. It's going to be a safety concern, especially if your kids are out and about. Think church camp, vacation Bible school, things like that. Girl Scout camp, that's what I did, as a kid. So I'm just thinking any outdoor activities that people will be aware of. So please make sure you're staying safe, staying weather aware. We'll be back on WCNC Charlotte at 11, and I'll see you next week.